Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. We're going to let a few minutes to let people come in from the waiting room, but welcome. We'll be getting started in just a few moments. For those of you guys just coming in, welcome. We're just giving a few more minutes, letting everybody come in from the waiting room. We'll get started here in just another minute or so. Okay, well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started if everybody's ready. I'm Ryan Kuhlman, President of National NREIA. Welcome to our December the 18th COVID-19 market update. This will be, I believe, our last official call for 2020. Today we have, of course, our COO, Charles Tassel, Director of Legislative Affairs, and our special guest today is Brendan Lewis, Senior Director of Business Development at Accruit. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our Executive Director, Rebecca McLean.
Welcome, everyone, and thanks so much for being here, especially on a cold, at least in our part of the country, December afternoon. So thanks so much. We want to thank our sponsors, the Home Depot Pro. They have been so kind to sponsor these sessions throughout all of this time. They have also been our partners for a very long time at the NREIA level to offer special programs for investors. They have discounts like 20% off paint. We have a special rebate program, and then other exclusive programs that are for investors that you can get as part of your membership at the local level. So if you have questions about that, then finding a local group is simple. But just to let you know, when you connect with us, you're connecting with a nonprofit association that's been serving the real estate industry for over 35 years. Our mission is to promote, to protect, and educate, and we have over 120 local groups that you can find, and we're over 40,000 strong at the local level. As I said, thank you for being with us, and if you need more resources or want to find that local group, you can do so on the website here at Find a Local Group. Or if you have COVID-19 questions that we didn't cover today, or you want to see some of the resources that we have, you can do that by clicking here under our COVID-19 update section. Just a real quick disclaimer, we are going to talk about some different strategies today and the legislative possibilities that go with that. We will also talk about some industry updates and how that can affect the strategies that you use. But none of us are attorneys or are practicing on this call, at least. And any financial questions that you have, anything that can be covered by a professional like an attorney or a CPA, you need to do that at the local level and ask their advice. So that being said, I am going to turn it over to our Director of Legislative Affairs, and he can tell you what's happening on the legislative front at this time.
Well, welcome everyone. Merry Christmas to everyone. Happy holidays. The hill's not quite there. We're almost there. Everybody keeps saying 11 o'clock, 11 o'clock. I tell you what, it's about 3 in the morning at this point. We punted down the road a little bit. What I'm talking about is whether the House, the Senate, and the White House are going to actually come to an agreement and actually have a bill for us. The settlement bills have come forward. We've been working behind the scenes. Senator Portman we work with rather closely here in Ohio, and he's actually got just did some updates for us. I want to share a couple of things with you that rental assistance specifically, and this is the reason I'm saying it specifically, is in the CARES Act, there was funding sent to states, and one of the viable solutions for the money was rental assistance. In the new programs, whether it's the House version, the Senate version, or the White House version, there's $25 billion set aside specifically for rental assistance. And that is going to be doled out on a person-by-person basis. So each state will get funds, and those funds have to be spent on rental assistance. So a couple of things to think about, and this is what's been very interesting on it, is these funds can go into pay rental arrears up to 18 months when they come out. So they can pay back to the early part of March, February when this started. They can also go into pay forward up to 12 months. Now, how you do that, I don't know, but they can pay forward as well. It's the government. They can look into an 8-ball and figure it out, I guess. I don't know, the weathermen can't do that, but I guess the government can. So one other piece that's interesting on this, and all you have to do is have a COVID-related impact. So whether that means you lost your job at a similar time, somebody just has to say, hey, it was COVID, and that's good enough for these funds to come through. And like I said, it's going to be $25 billion coming through to the states. Each state will have its funding and be able to send those funds out. There are a number of states that are doing it well, and a number of states that actually don't have very many restrictions on those funds coming in as well. So hopefully that's going to be utilized as well. I do want to give you one caveat, or I should say one positive and then one caveat. The positive is the checks will actually come to the property owner. So this isn't going to be a check that comes out to the renter and then maybe they get you the check. This will be a check that's actually written and directed directly to the landlord for those arrearages. It can actually be used for utility arrearages as well. So again, a good piece there. Here's the caveat. The CDC eviction is going to be extended until at least January 31st. That will be part of this, assuming the bill goes forward, assuming it's signed. And again, the Senate is staying in DC until this is done. The House is staying there. They're actually, say it this way, only a few $1 billion apart, which ironically is not much money at this point, considering there were literally trillions apart before. So we're now at a point where we're talking minor differences and some tweaks on proposals and protocols and programs. So they're pretty close to getting there. And as this comes out, folks, this will be something we shoot out to you as an update. There'll be some summaries. I mean, I've already got drafted documents getting ready to go out, but they've got to sign it and move forward. One other benefit of this, a lot of places have been panic spending their CARES money. CARES money was supposed to expire on December 31st. Those CARES funds are actually going to be extended until December 31st of 2021. That way, there doesn't have to be a quick expenditure of it, but it can actually still be utilized. And programs that are in place will be able to continue going with those funds without having to go, oh my word, we're at December 30th, spend everything. So that's a good thing, and it'll hopefully lead to some more calmer, cooler heads sending funds out. And one of those pieces, of course, is funds coming out to us. Again, as soon as that passes, we'll be sending emails out. We'll probably put a little blurb together as well and get something out on video. The other piece I want to mention, and this is one of those mixed bags, is the funding for the states and the cities has been taken off the table. And my conservative instincts say, okay, that's a good thing because maybe it shouldn't have been going out. My liberal instinct goes, wait a second, those areas are short on dollars. And from a business perspective, let me kind of cut down through the center of it is, if those funds do go out, those states and municipalities will not be looking to us nearly as much, I mean, us as businesses, to raise taxes on, especially at a time when things are difficult. So there's multiple sides to this, and I expect to see something in February if it doesn't come out in this next batch. So there's going to be a lot coming. There will be some more information as it comes out, and we'll send you out the details. And please remember, we're going to send you out the federal spectrum of what it passes, and it'll be up to what your state actually implements and how they process it from there. That's the main focus. With that, hey, have a Merry Christmas. Keep in touch with us. If there's a question you have, don't hesitate to shoot us an email and see if we can help with anything. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rebecca.
Couple questions, sir. For those that are REIA leaders that are on this call, we talked about it a little bit on the call on Wednesday in the leadership training, but Don Schaefer says that they have their federal representative, Mike Boss, speaking at their January Zoom meeting about the $25 billion available for rental assistance. Who else could they be looking toward that would be good to have at that meeting to discuss this, the availability, how to use it, all of those things?
Well, first and foremost, it's going to be your state, because these funds are going to come out through the states. The debate was to have it come out through ESG, which is the Emergency Shelter Grant Funds through HUD. And that was nixed. The senator said, no, we want it to come out to the states, basically like a block grant. So one of your state elected officials might be the best person to reach out to find out who's handling it in your state. In some areas, it might be a jobs and family services type thing. Other places, it's going to be a variety of different options. I mean, it depends on which state and how they're handling the process. Some of them don't even have a process yet because they didn't do any kind of rental assistance. I see the question on there about 25 billion sounds like a lot. That, and you know, what's a few billion among friends, right? The deficit that we've heard. So in our housing coalition discussions, we've been having discussions that range somewhere between about 40 and 70 billion in lost rents, arrearages, and some of that 70 billion is based on, okay, if these people who have made agreements and are paying don't pay, where am I at? So that's where those numbers range come in from. Again, 25 will make a heck of a dent in it, but the other side is, remember, if you get a bump up in unemployment, you get some other funds coming in, a stimulus check that might come with this as well. Those are ways to actually kind of offset it. And that's really what Congress saw as ways of offsetting rental assistance directly in the first CARES Act.
Speaking of which, Charles, we sent out a survey trying to get information from the group, the members, about what that looks like in terms of delinquent rents and things for them. Can you talk about that survey and the fact that we were trying to pull it together to make an impact on this upcoming vote?
I will, and I feel like I should take my hat off and kind of take off the Christmas spirit for a moment, because I feel like the Grinch talking about it. One of the very concerning facts, and this is something from a leadership perspective we need to be concerned about, is if you look at the whole breadth and spectrum of rental property across the country, there's about a 7 to 10% spread among smaller ownership that are not well capitalized, and that are basically saying, hey, sometime in the next 6 months, if things don't change, I'm looking at going bankrupt. And people may say, oh, it's going to be opportunities. If it were 2 or 3%, there's opportunities there. When we start talking about 7 to 10% of the entire rental market across the country, that's a huge impact. So again, that's where one of the things, you know, if you bring in somebody to talk about the rental assistance, that helps both the renter and the property owner. And that is a key piece of this. This is one of the things we've been talking about. Part of the reason we did this survey is to get the information up to DC so that they were aware of the actual impact of where things are at. Let me mention there's a question, let's see, a couple of questions on apartments and who will get the money. This really is going to be, some of this first come, first serve. But honestly, getting information to your residents is really going to be key to that. Especially if you've got residents who are behind. That's going to be absolutely imperative to move forward with and get them the information. Think of yourself as a resource, just as your REIA is a resource. Make sure you're becoming a resource for your residents and sending them and giving them the documents. I know we've got property owners who are actually, they'll bring a scanner down, they'll bring the computer down and help the residents scan their documentation so they can get it to the state or get it to the proper agency. And if you want your money, sometimes you're going to have to help a little bit and go a little farther and above and beyond in this time.
Even before CARES Act money 2, CARES Act 2 money comes out, there is money through the end of the year that states are trying to push out. Can you give them some examples of where they may be seeing that money in the state? I know for us here in Ohio, you're looking at the Community Action Agency groups. But
Right.
can you tell them where they may be looking in their states, what they should do to get through the 31st?
So that's the housing associations, and that's even those funds from CARES have actually been extended out so that the people, well, in this bill, they will be extended out once it's passed. I want to give that caveat. I'm not saying it's already done. When this bill passes, it will be extended to next year. So that's one of the beautiful things about it, because a lot of people, state of Ohio, I'll give you an example, is sitting on $2 billion of CARES funds they haven't spent yet because of the restrictions on CARES fund. Now, as you give them extended timeframes, and even the organizations that have been processing a lot of these rental requests and assistance requests, they are just plain overwhelmed. As we go into the holidays, it's going to get even tougher for them. So that's one of the key pieces. One of the questions that came up was foreclosure sales ending. FHFA has extended to, I believe, January 31st as well. And the reason you're seeing a January 31st deadline is that gives a new administration approximately 10 days to figure out if they're going to make new edicts or regulations, or what they're going to do. So that's really why you're seeing a January 31st deadline. The expectation is the Biden administration would actually go to a March 31st deadline for eviction moratorium. And it may be more stringent than the current CDC moratorium. So as those things change, as we get updates, we'll get that out to you. But right now, everybody's waiting for this bill to get signed, and we'll be getting information out to you on that.
Awesome, thank you. I also want to say a huge thank you to Charles and Kevin Coughlin for kind of keeping us up to date this whole year, and for the resources that they've put together. Just to let you know, our new website with its resource center will launch in January, and Kevin put together a booklet that will be going to your local REIA. But if your local REIA is not quickly enough filling it out and getting it available, and you need it sooner, we'll have it on our site fairly quickly. And it talks to your resident about things that they can do in terms of finding resources if they are in a challenging situation with being unable to pay rent and that sort of thing. And then it has the back page will allow you to fill in known resources in your area, and that will include both state agencies for rent resources and potentially the best well-known maybe faith-based agencies or similar that have funds available for rental assistance and other potentially assistance for food pantries and those sorts of things. So that will be available as we go forward. Again, it'll be distributed to your locals. We hope that they will be able to get those resources turned around and available, but if not, and you need it right away, it will be on our site in January. So excited about that. Thank you again, Charles and Kevin, for the resources that you're putting together for us. Speaking of resources and strategies and potential changes, we have a guest speaker today that we're really excited to have. Brendan Lewis is here with Accruit. They are a 1031 company, and we've talked a lot about potentially some having to change strategies and some of the regulatory issues that may come up around strategies. And we've asked him to come on because I know many of you have reached out to say, I want to make some changes. I want to do some things a little differently. I may want to roll into 1031 into something or 1031 out of something. And so with the feedback that we've gotten from you, we've asked an expert to come on today to tell us what that might look like going forward. What should we be looking for in terms of possible changes? And then what kind of possible solutions do you think that are available as we sidestep those? And just to let everybody know, we will be, as we see these coming changes, Accruit is bringing to us education that we can get to you, so you'll know what to do. But Brendan, I'm going to let you talk about that more. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. Again, we talk about 1031 exchange, and I don't know how familiar with it you folks are, but essentially it's a section of the tax code that allows for deferral of capital gains that would normally be due upon the sale of investment real estate. And so this is a section of the tax code that's existed in one form or another for over 100 years. And with the Biden administration coming in, there's been some sort of rumblings about what's going to happen with 1031 exchange. And so I want to give a little bit of information in terms of, from our perspective in the industry, what we're seeing, what could happen, what's likely to happen, and, be happy to answer, any questions. As I said, exchange has been part of the tax code for, almost 100 years now. It really has become a vital part of, not only for individual investors, but for businesses and, of all different types of industries to be able to pivot and shift when things aren't, working out for them in terms of their investments. So, when in businesses, we see people, we see businesses use 1031 exchange to move facilities and not be in a position where they are tax locked or, can't afford the tax bill that they would owe upon the sale of it. So it really is crucial. And then when it comes to individual, investors, it's become vital in those situations, and we've seen a tremendous uptick in the number of exchanges, both in the volume of exchanges, but then also in the transactional size. Everybody's participating in these as much as they can, and so the whole idea here is, like I said, it's a deferral of capital gains. It isn't a tax-free transaction. But essentially, the biggest thing is that, and I'll get to kind of what we're talking about in terms of the Biden proposal. But, the biggest thing here is that like-kind exchange is what it's also known as, encourages capital investment for the highest and best use of property. So as we start to see, or we've already seen it, but we're going to continue to see in the commercial sector, office buildings and different types of properties are going to need to be repurposed. And so in order to incentivize investors to repurpose those types of buildings, creating jobs and et cetera along the way, we need to make it as easy as possible for that transition. So, and then in terms of just the industry as a whole, it doesn't matter if you've done 10 exchanges or you've never done an exchange. If any part of your business or your life touches the real estate space, it's crucial that this is something that stays in the tax code. It really is sort of a trickle down situation here, because if we see a potential potential elimination of Section 1031, or more likely limitations of Section 1031, it's going to affect everybody. I mean, it affects, I have a list here. I wanted to make sure I didn't leave anybody out. Real estate agents, title and property insurers, escrow settlement agents, lenders, appraisers, surveyors, attorneys, inspectors, contractors, building supply vendors. I mean, it just goes all the way down the list. So really important that folks are informed on this topic. Obviously, the runoff elections in Georgia are going to have a big, influence on what happens going forward. Like I said, this is something that has been in the tax code for a very long time. The likelihood of it, there was sort of an initial concern of worst case scenario is that it gets eliminated. The number that's being tossed around is more, not necessarily elimination, but that it's limited to those who make less than $400,000 a year, and that's kind of a number that's been mentioned over and over again, not just in terms of capital gains taxes, but in other areas. And we'll see kind of what happens. What we're doing as a company, Accruit, and then also being affiliated with the Federation of Exchange Accommodators, our national organization. We have folks who have been really involved in the government affairs committee and very involved in that organization, and they are on our industry's behalf, and really the real estate industry in general have been going to bat for 1031 exchange. Contacting working with the House and the Senate, their aides and their advisors to really dispel the rumors. There's sort of misconception in terms of, this is something for the rich. This is something for people who have a lot of money, and it isn't always the case. Like I said, we've seen a huge uptick in the volume of deals that we're doing this year, especially in the third and fourth quarter. Many of those deals are not into the tens and millions of dollars. These are regular people who own investment property, and these might be investments that just aren't working for them. They feel as though they can get a better rate of return if they sell and buy something else. They are maybe relocating, and it creates a management concern of managing those properties if they don't live in that area. Maybe they want to move those properties to a different market. There's all sorts of reasons, but they should be made whole, as a result of that change, sale and purchase via the 1031 exchange. So, again, working with FEA, working with the House and the Senate to try to convey the dispel the rumors, and that this isn't for the rich, and really trying to reinforce the impact on a micro level and on a macro level, because on at a local level, there's things like transfer taxes and all these different things that happen, and also supporting local vendors, and all of the folks that I mentioned. And then you can, again, it goes all the way up to at a macro level as well. Again, this isn't a tax-free transaction. At some point, the taxes are paid, but the idea is that along the way, you're able to maintain as much as the exchanger and taxpayer. You're able to maintain as much of your equity as possible. Keep that money working for you. There's a lot of studies to indicate that. That most exchangers wind up buying properties that are up to 30% higher in cost to the one that they sold. So this is just, there's a lot of positive benefits, and so it's about relaying that to the powers that be, and making sure that they're aware of that. So the idea of a complete overhaul is probably unlikely. At this point, but if we do see something, and it could happen as early as maybe February, we really don't know. It's kind of, but I get asked quite often, and this idea of, is it going to be retroactive? So two questions that I'm getting asked a lot. Number one is, should I do an exchange because they might go away? The ability to do, and my answer is, do an exchange if it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, of course, don't. But do an exchange, take advantage of it if it makes sense for the properties the property you may be selling and what you'd be acquiring. And then this idea, the other question I get asked a lot, especially since the election concluded and we have sort of some finality there, is this going to be retroactive? So if something, if they eliminate 1031 exchange, or if they greatly reduce the ability for people to participate in them, is it going to be retroactive? And that sort of begs the question of like an ex post facto thing, where it's like, from a legal standpoint, it's like, okay, well, something that was legal at one point, now we've made it illegal. Well, that doesn't really quite work. So they can't go back and say, no, this is not okay. So from our perspective, we don't think that that's going to happen. I think that we'd love to take questions. I think one of the things that's important also is, again, if you're any one of those people that I've mentioned, or if you touch real estate in any way as an investor principal, or in any of it, there is sort of a call to action, and that is to go to, there's a website, it's www.1031taxreform.com/take-action. And what that is, and I'll give you the address again, but what that is you fill in your information. I've done it myself. You fill in your information, it's through the FEA. So it isn't like nobody's selling to you or anything like that. It's not nothing like that, but it's through the FEA. What it does is it asks for your home address and your zip code address. and it will write a letter, generate a letter to both yours, your senators and your House of Representatives, House reps in your local area. That essentially, you can see what it says. It reiterates that this is something that's important to you and you would like them to know. I've done it. I happen to live in North Texas. I got a call from the senator's office, and they recognized that I'd sent this in, and they realized that it was something that, and they were taking it very seriously. And then from the local representative, I actually got a call from him, and he asked me several questions about it and how it affected me. And of course, I'm in the industry, but I know that this is something that is, that there's tremendous benefit. Not just to the taxpayer, but beyond that. So again, that's www.1031taxreform.com/take-action. And you can go in there. It's simple. It takes 5 minutes. I think that kind of to close things off here, and again, if there's any questions, eliminating 1031 exchange, like I said, while it's unlikely, it's crucial that we take action and write into, go on this website and express our concern. Even in the best of times, eliminating something like 1031 exchange would have a negative impact, increasing the cost of capital, slowing rate of investment, increasing asset holding periods, reducing real estate transactional activity. That's obviously a big one. But in light of the current pandemic and the economic upheaval that we're experiencing, sort of as a country and the world, really, the contractionary impact on American businesses, and individuals, and the U.S. economy would be even worse. So, again, it's important to act on these kind of things, and we're going to have to see how it plays out in Georgia and go from there.
Thank you so much for kind of walking us through what that looks like. Lori did put in the chat bar for those of you who are interested, and we hope many, if not all of you are, in actually taking some action there. It's very similar, or it basically is Voters' Voice, which for those of you who have supported us in legislative action, you'll be familiar with that. So please take a moment to go out there. Even if you're not potentially engaging in that right now in a 1031, it needs to be guarded for the reasons that we just expressed. So I do have a couple questions for you, sir, if you don't mind. Knowing that we're heading into the end of the year, and some people still have some transactions that they are trying to get done, can you do a 1031? Can the transaction take place in 2 different years? Meaning, can you have a 2020 sale, but not pick up the other property until 2021?
Yes. The answer is yes. The tax consequence, if for instance you weren't able to complete the exchange, which by the way, there's no downside to doing an exchange. There's no penalty or anything like that. Just for folks' edification. But yes, it can span 2 years. The taxable event occurs, in the year where the property was when sold. So if you sold a property in 2020. And certainly you have that 180-day period to replace it, but if you were unable to do so, it's going to fall in 2020. So if you, for instance, had already filed your taxes, let's say if it's this month, and then you file your taxes January, February, March, April, sometime in that space, you would have to go back and file an amendment for that.
Awesome. And then when you do a 1031 exchange, they're asking, is there a fee and how much is it?
That's a great question. I would say inquire within. It really depends on the complexity of the transaction. We're sort of right around, I'm just going to ballpark. It's to start an exchange, it's about $750. It can go all the way up. There's very complex versions of 1031 exchange, like doing a reverse exchange where you buy and then you sell, or an improvement exchange where you're taking a portion of the proceeds from the sale and improving a replacement property or a property you already own. Those can get pricier. And those, the sort of, I always like to say the industry standard is like somewhere between 6,000 and 12,000. They're not often 12,000, but somewhere in that range. But they, you know, they require a lot more work on our part, and typically they're facilitated by an attorney that's on staff with us. So.
Do you have to use a 1031 professional, or is it just highly, highly recommended so that you don't get yourself into such big tax trouble you can't kind of dig yourself out?
So the regulations, this is, you know, we talked about the FEA, Federation of Exchange Accommodators. The IRS requires that a taxpayer use what's called a qualified intermediary or exchange accommodator. You know, there's synonyms, but yes, you have to use one. The regulations states that the exchanger cannot have actual or constructive receipt of the funds. So that's why we exist. You always want to use an exchange company that is a member of the FEA, because they have, you know, more stringent, strict guidelines in terms of you know, insurance, errors and omissions, liability, all that kind of stuff, because we are holding your money. And so we've been doing this for 20 years. You know, we're not going anywhere, but it's important to choose a company that is with the FEA. There's also, you know, you may have in your local, you know, where you live, you might have somebody that says your attorney or your real estate agent or somebody can, oh, we can hold those funds in trust for you, or do an, you know, facilitate the exchange. That's not the case. Anybody that's acted on your behalf in the last 3 years, and I would probably go as far as saying maybe even longer, to be safe, cannot facilitate an exchange for you, because they're what's called a disqualified party. So it has to be a QI, qualified intermediary, exchange company, again, FEA.
Awesome.
Or Accruit, even better.
Absolutely. And we will be talking about, as I said when I introduced you, we'll be talking more about what your company does, how you can help, the services offered, and then if we need to make any adjustments, and they need to make adjustments in their expectations on what they can do, we're going to be doing that in education sessions that'll be available via webinars, and then of course in university, NREIA University as well. A couple other questions, if I could, sir,
Sure,
before I let you go.
absolutely.
To clarify, looking at a limit of 400K of business net income or 400K of profit on the sale of the property?
It's 400,000 in income, and that's sort of some, you know, I was having this conversation actually earlier with the CEO of our company, and it's kind of, you know, you start to think about all these, it's just not very clear. Again, we're going to start to see this unfold, and we're going to get some further, you know, clarification, but, you know, folks sometimes will have, you know, if you had less than 400,000 on your personal returns and less than 400,000 on your business returns, and I mean, you could have entities. I mean, so anyway, it's just it raises a lot of questions, but that's what's been, you know, sort of publicized at this point, is $400,000 of income. So, you know, not 400,000 of gain, to answer the question.
Perfect. And then can you, sir, please can you give verbally and then type into the chat contact information?
Yes.
So that they can reach you.
My phone number is very easy. I'm going to type it in now, but I'll give it to you also. I can be reached, and it's in a text or phone call at 469-331-1031.
Very catchy.
I had
How
to pay a lot of money for that phone number, so use it.
if you got it back in the day, you definitely did. Can you also give them an email and a website, sir?
Yes, so we are www.accruit.com. And my email is Brendan, BRENDANL, as in Lewis, at Accruit, ACCRUIT.com. But again, you can easily text me or call me 469-331-1031.
And then just to clarify that last question a little further, is it a 400K adjusted income or gross income?
We're going to have to wait and see, I think. You know, I don't have an answer for you on that. I would probably say I think it's probably going to be maybe adjusted income, but we'll have to kind of wait and see. So
yeah, stay tuned. We'll keep you
I mean,
informed on
and
that.
I
How's
think
that for an answer?
as these things kind of, as things unfold, we're going to get more clarification on what this is. You know, you can have a proposal, but it's all a lot of it at this point is sort of just hyperbole. And so we've got to see something that's more concrete, and it will outline these things. And for all we know, it might have no effect on 1031, but I think just merely that taking that action to go to that website and you know, letting your local representatives know that it's something that you feel is important is a wise decision. So
I definitely agree. And just showing your support, like I said, you may not be using it this year or maybe not even next year, but
right.
as an investor and you grow your portfolio, you just never know when you're going to need that availability, and keeping the deals turning in the market and keeping people invested in the market, and all the people that Brenda talked about that kind of touch that transaction. It's important to keep those alive for those reasons. So
and we've historically seen, you know, I think it's been different this year, but we've historically seen, you know, 1031 exchange, or at least from my viewpoint, 1031 exchange has been underutilized in the residential space, and it is used a lot in the commercial, business, agricultural, you know. So if you know, it's a lot of it has to do with education, and a lot of the time, I mean, I've been in real estate for 15 years, and I was a real estate broker at one point, and so I know that a lot of it is you know, the agents have to be educating their clients. Commercial agents are just a lot more knowledgeable about these kind of topics. So it's just important. So even if it's just a simple, you know, question that you have, or, you know, running a situation by me, it doesn't have to be an imminent transaction. You know, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. And I think it'll be good to look at this kind of, Brendan. We had someone on from George Mason University that talks about, Charles, tell me if I said that wrong group, but that's talking about kind of repurposing of property. And I know some of us are looking at potentially shifting strategies and looking at other things we can get into with the big shift over the last 6 to 9 months in online buying. You know, we got a boost in retail sales, which we're going to talk about in the upcoming industry presentation, but retail is so much online now, and so the need for warehouse and distribution space that we didn't need before, that had kind of gone away, and you saw those industrial spaces kind of go away. And I know some of our people were kind of dabbling in industrial, and then they kind of changed that to potentially converting it to residential, and now, you know, maybe not so much, because the scramble is on to go back and look at industrial and distribution warehouses. So,
and I think that there's going to be, you know, we're going to see, and this is not so much on, you know, 1031 exchange, but just in terms of real estate in general, from my perspective and having been in this industry, and, you know, the folks I talk to, you know, a lot of these, you know, it's unfortunate that companies have closed, you know, their doors, and, you know, a lot of them are retail. It was a lot of them it was bound to happen. It's just, this just sort of accelerated it, unfortunately. But just as you said, you know, we're going to start to see a major repurposing, I think, and it's a lot of it is the commercial office space is going to be repurposed. I've been hearing things about turning it into retirement communities, turning it into, we've seen a lot of hotels. They've done it here in Dallas, where they've turned them into hotels, which I think is a great idea. Apartment buildings, you know, different things. But this is the first time really that we've, maybe not first time, but in recent years, where we've seen a suburbanizing economy on a national scale. It isn't local to Dallas Fort Worth. It isn't local to the Chicago land area. You know, it's on a national scale. And because work from home, you know, all of the things we all know about, people need more space, so they're going out and they don't have to live in the city anymore. And so we're going to see repurposing, I think, in a lot of different asset types.
I think that's definitely true. And shout out to Brad Beckett on the call today, our staff member. He does a great job at keeping you informed of kind of these trends and things coming up on real estate investing today. And then the Real Estate Journal, our economist, Chris Keel, has a good article about what he sees potentially happening and addressing all of these issues. So look in your mailboxes for that to be coming to you. It'll also be posted on Real Estate Investing Today when that comes out. Charles, do you want to jump in, or were you just here to save me if I completely messed up what you're here to save me? Thank you so much. Somebody needs to.
That transition, Brendan covered it. That's exactly what we're seeing across the country. And folks, the other piece that's behind that is we're hearing from the economists. Chris Keel and I keep in touch on a weekly basis. And one of the things that was touched on is local distribution. One of the things that is kind of going away is that just-in-time inventory process. People have realized, and businesses have realized, especially in this world right now, at least for the next couple of years, you better have some supplies in your back room, because you could have stuff shut down very quickly and you're out of business. So
as long as it's a well-oiled machine, that works great and can really keep costs down. But when it doesn't work, it can really be a disaster.
I'll leave you with one last piece, and assuming there's no more questions, I'll leave you with some positive sort of stuff. I'm very bull on real estate. I'm sure as many of you are. I think that we're going to see, in many parts of the country, real estate has never, in residential, it's crazy. And, in the title industry, the folks that I work with in terms of refinances and resale type transactions, it's like unprecedented. They've never seen before. So some positive news there. And I think once we start to see, we've already had to make these adjustments throughout 2020 and how we're, viewing properties and how we're transacting business and all that. But I think that, with vaccines on the horizon and a better handle on COVID, I think that 2021 is going to be a much, much better year than 2020 was. So.
Great way to end that. Thank you so much. I agree. So we're going to now kind of look at things that support everything that Brenda just said in terms of stats. I'm going to transition to.
I'm going to jump, and everybody happy holidays, and thanks
so much,
for having me.
Appreciate that. Well, what should have been, there we go. Just to kind of follow up on everything that we've talked about, heading into the end of the year, we're going to start back in some of the things that numbers that were released in October that we had not had a chance to discuss as of yet. Retail sales were up. The economy is moving along the recovery path. And retail sales posted a small gain in October. It's the smallest gain since May, when business activity restarted. But part of that is because we've had so many areas close the economy again and do shutdowns. I know we've really experienced that in Kentucky and Ohio, and I know many of you have said to us that you're feeling the same thing. A bulk of those sales, as we discussed just a moment ago, are driven by e-commerce sales. And but vehicle dealers and gasoline stations as well. Sales declined at grocery stores, restaurants, bars, and home furnishing stores. I don't know what we're all eating, if that's true, but hey, that's maybe we had all stocked up previously and dipping into the supplies. The Federal Reserve released data on rising industrial production, showing that manufacturing activity advanced, but motor vehicle production lagged in October. Sales had been up on cars for a while, but that when that starts to slow, then production is going to start slowing as well. But all of this industrial and manufacturing and e-commerce sales, where you need warehouse and industrial distribution space, is all driving some of those changes in the market, as we discussed previously. As far as unemployment rates, the job report shows that unemployment rate declined again in November. More jobs were added in transportation and warehousing, again, following along those themes, business services, and no surprise, the healthcare industry. Progress is good, but again, the pace slowed, raising a concern, particularly since we've had roughly 10 million fewer jobs now than we had in February when this mess all started. And COVID case levels are high and potentially still climbing. I got to fall in those ranks last month. So know how that can be. The Fed testified before Congress 2 weeks ago, pushing for additional stimulus to support vulnerable households and businesses until the economy is more fully healed. And Charles talked about how I think that their testimony played a large part in moving finally the CARES Act along. There was little new economic data last week, but what we saw suggests that the labor market remains stressed as jobless claims rose. On a worrisome note, over 12 million are scheduled to run out of benefits in December, which made that CARES Act vote incredibly important. I think that was the other thing they felt as this was coming up for a vote is, that there's a ticking time clock here of what's going to happen to a very large section of people if we cannot move forward with it. And as Charles said, it looks like it's going to pass, thank goodness, and having some relief. But these numbers show that a stopgap was needed before the economy started losing even more momentum, which is, kind of worrisome for all of us. Additionally, inflation remains muted and well below the Fed's 2% target, which is kind of amazing with all the money pumped into the system. You would have thought that that would not happen, but here we are. These numbers would typically invite speculation of whether the Fed would cut rates next week, but the Fed's rates are already at zero, so they're just cementing the firm projections that increases are not going to come anytime soon in that number. So we've all kind of been talking about that, but that's where we are. So,
Rebecca, can I comment on that real quick?
Please.
The Fed has actually gone beyond just saying they're not going to cut rates and that they're not going to raise rates. They're actually saying, hey, we're good with having some level of inflation. In fact, we're not even going to jump once we start seeing inflation. We're going to let it ride for a little bit. So that's a different tone than they've had.
Well, exactly. They have said for a very long time that 2% is, kind of the threshold that they were going to look at. But I think things are so unexpected and we're playing in a different, kind of arena than they have ever seen before and that anybody had been comfortable with. And so they're having to change expectations.
And they are. And they're worried about deflation more than inflation at this point.
Yes, agreed. On the for sale side, the market remains hot with mortgage rates remaining steady at recent lows. And this is causing buyer demand to remain high. Weeks of 12.3 reported another new low on mortgage rates. And at 12.10, we still remain unchanged at those low rates. I mean, it's just, we saw coming into 2020, the thought that those numbers were going to edge up. And yeah, with everything that's happened, that's certainly not a thing. Lending has shot up another 17 points in the third quarter of 2020 as the U.S. braces for more impacts of the coronavirus pandemic. So people are getting into homes. We're going to talk about that in just a second. And the dollar amount of home purchase loans spiked 35% over the second quarter. That's another slide that we'll go over here in just a moment. Down payments and mortgage amounts are rising to new heights in the third quarter. So that brings me to this slide, which because of mortgage rates and buying homes and down payments and all of the things that they need, we're at 14.35 trillion in U.S. household debt. It's up $87 billion. And here's the odd thing about this is credit card debt is going down still. So we've got credit card debt declining, but household debt still increasing. And that's because people are taking on a lot with new homes. They are just desperate to get into a new space. So I thought that was really interesting. So I am so sorry. The November median home asking price on that note is up 12.7%. Continuously increasing. I remember when the realtor said starting in September, hey, you're gonna see that number come down. It's going to get better. And I think they started that going at the back to school time. And every month since then, they're like, oh, we're so surprised. This is still going up. And it's the reason that happened is because of inventory. And we're going to look at those inventory numbers here in a second. But for now, take a look at this. The median home asking price, we said 12.7% for November. Check out then week ending December 5th. Now we're up to 13.5%. So year over year, it's just incredible how that number keeps going up. And it's because so much of it is inventory related. And this is why. Take a look at this on the inventory side. There are fewer homes and with new sellers last month. You can see here that overall, you're down and down, but you see that the Northeast and the West, you actually have people getting out. They are putting their homes on the market in those areas. So, but overall, still incredible in terms of how it's tightening up. Pending home sales, as you can see, down again in October, and that ends up being a trend through this period. The medium home asking price, we just talked about this, but here the actual number. It's down in November just a little bit. We peaked at 350. We're down just a tiny bit in November, but this slowdown is much smaller than what we typically see it this year. As I just said, you usually start seeing home prices slow a little bit in August. And first of all, it's not slowing down any till now, and in such small amounts. So the home price growth here, you can see, is below baseline, though, in 26 of 50 of the top 50 markets. So although we talk in national numbers, you see that going up. In local markets, that's all different. So make sure that you understand that real estate is all local, and see what's happening in your market as you're placing your homes on the market, especially if you're flipping right now. And time on market, though, is faster than baseline in 45 of the 50 markets. And January numbers is what they're using as a baseline right now to measure everything against. Existing home sales. So as another sign of great demand late in the year, existing home sales postponed expected in October. They're pushing supply to a new record low level. Check this out, 2.5 months in terms of our supply. Pretty incredible. I did then take this portion of a spreadsheet, and your median listing price, you can see here, just keeps creeping up. Your active listing count keeps creeping around in these numbers, but look how low that is. It's incredible. Median days on market, shrinking. Median days on the market in terms of days, 13 and 14 days on market. Year over year differences is, it's going down by 13 and 14 days. Median days on the market in percentages, look at this decrease in the percentage of time on market. And the count of new listings that are coming onto the market, of course, is driving all of this, because people are terrified that they might not get their home. And so, kind of, if it's coming available, they're taking it. You're also seeing now what we speculated on coming out of lockdown, that people would start fleeing city centers and head to the suburbs. And you're seeing that. Realtor.com just a couple weeks ago released a list of the suburbs of the largest urban areas that offer the best value for the money, because there's such a flee. And you can see this here, what they believe. If you're in Atlanta, then they think Marietta is the closest suburb that has the best pricing available. So you may want to take a look at this. You will be emailed this entire slide deck, but if you're looking for places to invest, you may want to look at these suburbs that are close to that urban core, where you may see a lot of flee from the city centers into the burbs, and you may be able to really capitalize on that. Here's some data and by the way, we're going to show that on the rental side, which is even more interesting, I think, here in a moment. But this data shows continued gains. October's home builders index reached a new record high, with optimism as strong buyer demand and low mortgage rates is driving demand. They slowed down just a little bit with with the crisis in terms of building, but because activity and the demand has picked up so much, you're really seeing that increase. So construction data is this strong optimism shows in the new construction data as well. While permits were unchanged from October to September, housing starts reached a post-recession high. The realtors also released last week their forecast for key housing indicators. I always find this to be very interesting. And what does this mean for what's ahead? They believe that although we may see some down months for the year as a whole, they expect home sales to rise by 7% and home prices to rise another 5+% from this year's highs. While they expect mortgage rates to remain low, especially in the early months of the year, they do expect by the end of the year for those numbers to creep up by a tiny, tiny bit. Not sure I'm all on board with that and that we will get turned around that quickly. As Charles said, the Fed, I think, is really being conservative in what they plan on doing. So we'll be curious if that prediction actually makes it. But that would mean even though home prices are expected to rise more slowly next year, you know, if those interest rates change at all on top of a rising price, it gets really, really difficult for home buyers to keep up and be in their payment range. So they'll be curious to see how that goes. They also did their report of the top housing markets for 2021. And what they're saying is they believe that several of those will be in California. They're naming Sacramento, San Jose, Oxnard, and Riverside. As hot markets, they're also showing Phoenix and Seattle here on the West Coast. They're showing for kind of closer to the East Coast, Charlotte and Harrisburg. If Rita's on the call, shout out to them. They don't make it onto a lot of our lists, so that's interesting for upcoming markets. And then Denver, who is almost always on the list, and Boise are in their top housing market predictions as well. They also, we have this, which is the realtors say that these are the top 10 markets during and post COVID-19. We showed a similar slide previously, but just to show kind of in comparison of where they think the hot markets are, they're showing Charleston, Atlanta, Indianapolis, Madison, Des Moines, Dallas, Phoenix, Provo, Boise, and Spokane as what they believe are the best markets, healthiest markets for the post-crisis. Moving on to rents, NMHC's rent tracker does show that we are finally seeing the effects of money running out in households that are renters. We're down to 75.4% in terms of collected rents, which means that number is just getting worse. If you look at the kind of overall where we are versus 2019 and then where we are even in this year, you see that this is a fairly steep fall off starting to happen as some of those unemployment benefits are running out. CARES money has run out for many households. And I think if they had not gone forward with CARES Act, this number could have gotten really ugly over time. So glad that they seem to be serious about addressing that and moving forward. So markets with the largest rent decreases, though, as I said, the flight to suburbia has really changed things. San Francisco was such a hot market, just a crazy hot market with a median rent of, kind of chokes me up to even say these numbers, being here in Ohio and Kentucky, it's crazy, but the median rent of $27.16, but they're seeing a year-over-year percent change of 27%. Can you imagine? As fast as they gained on that median rent, they have really had a challenge this year. New York in a similar situation, their median rent being $3,175 and sliding 18.6%. You also see on the list San Mateo, Suffolk, and King County in Washington, which would include Seattle. So just huge numbers there in terms of decrease in rent because people are fleeing to suburbia, because you can see here the differences. So if you're in California, Sacramento, look how much less their median rent is, and that's an increase of 14.7% as people are going to smaller markets. You have Monroe, New York on the list, Marion, Indiana, Hamilton, Ohio, a shout out for us, for a 13.5% year-over-year increase. did not expect to be in on any of these kinds of lists, so that's kind of awesome. And Pinellas, Florida at a 12.1% increase. But the flight to suburbia, guys, is real. We started talking about it fairly early and could not find the data to support it for a couple months after we started the prediction. And then all of a sudden, you've seen it turn the corner, and it's been quick and kind of terrible. But also, foreclosures are a big topic right now. Some of you had some questions in the chat bar about that, and wanted to address those. Foreclosure starts have declined monthly nationwide. A total of 5,256 U.S. properties started the foreclosure process in November, down 13% from last month and down 79% from a year ago. That's due to the moratorium. And so you're going to see that have an effect on foreclosed properties. Bank repossessions see a 22% decline. So sorry, a decline from last month. So those REOs you're seeing decline as well. So on a good note, because there's things that are happening in the market, median price of foreclosed homes is 36% less than the median for all sales in the third quarter. So, your median discount of a foreclosed property is right at generally a third. So, kind of 33%. So you're seeing it be 36% and edging up. This is a discount that's up for the fourth straight quarter on foreclosed homes. And the gap is the highest in lower priced areas of the nation. So if they were already struggling, the foreclosures there are just kind of exacerbating that. The REO discount is at its best level since Q3 of 2017. And the states where you're going to find the highest foreclosure rates in general are going to be Florida, Illinois, and Oklahoma in those categories. So for the third quarter of 2016 through the first quarter of 2019, the discount declined from 40.2% to 33%. So we're heading back up into those 2016 numbers. Over the past year, it's going back the other way, improving the last of the 4 quarters. The gap is nowhere near the peak discount of the past 15 years, which in 2005, which is not the date that I thought it would be the highest, but it was, and it was at 47% is what you were getting a foreclosed home, discounted at that time. But it is now the best level since that third quarter of 2017. So, little more foreclosure news. The deepest discounts on REO properties are in the Midwest and South, and that's because they were kind of struggling and had the lowest prices already. So the biggest discount during the third quarter came in Virginia, where the median $49,000 price of a bank-owned property was 73% off the typical $182,750 price of all homes. In Michigan, the median $82,450 was 57% off. At the opposite end of the discount spectrum, the typical REO home in Nevada sold for $278,000, which was just 12% off the $315,000. In Hawaii, the state with the nation's most expensive housing, the median price stood at $492,000, which was only 15% off their median. On flipping trends in general, so if you can find those foreclosures, or you're finding other properties to flip, you can see here that we are staying right at stable in terms of the percentage of homes flipped in terms of percentage homes sold. And that's because home buyers are eating up any homes that are out there. You can see the difference here. It's gone up and down, but it keeps creeping up and up and up. So certainly flipping is a little more difficult to do right now. However, you've got your largest quarterly decreases in places like Killeen, Texas, Savannah, York, Pennsylvania, Greeley, Colorado, and Springfield, Massachusetts. Your biggest quarterly decreases in metros over 1 million. So in your larger areas are Raleigh, Atlanta, Kansas City, San Diego, and Rochester. The places where actually flipping is up will be in Davenport, Hilton Head, which I'm a tiny bit surprised about, Scranton, Amarillo, and Kalamazoo. I did not expect a resort town to make an appearance during all of the things that we have going on, but I guess when it looks attractive enough, investors will hop on it. So in profit trends that we're seeing here in flipping, the rate of flipping may have dropped again in the third quarter, but that's maybe because both profits and profit margins have increased, but only in certain areas. So we'll take a look at this overall. You can see that nice increase, but I'll show you kind of where they've been located. The gross profit on the typical home flip nationwide rose in the third quarter of 2020 to 73,766, the highest amount since at least 2000. That amount was up from 69,000 in the second quarter of 2020 and from 61 in the third quarter of last year. The gain pushed profit margins up with a typical gross flipping profit of 73,766 in the third quarter, translating into a 44.4% return on investment compared to the original acquisition price, which is pretty incredible to me. The challenge here, as you saw though, is with inventory not being available, it helps because your home prices are up, and when you flip, you can get this great price on it right now because of the inventory in the market, but then you have to be able to get that property to do that. So it's going to depend very much where you are. And it's, you know, again, we talk about all real estate being local, and no more so than in flipping. Investors are selling for at least double their purchase price in 14 different markets. We're going to outline some of those here. But home flipping profit margins increased in the third quarter of 2019 to the third quarter of 2014 in 104 of the 159 metro areas with data enough to analyze. So you can see that the biggest gains are happening in Brownsville, Texas, Austin, Texas, Waco, Texas, Springfield, Missouri, and Savannah, Georgia. Some of those things that I think, well, maybe not so much Springfield, but in other areas, part of what allows this to happen is regulation not as high in some of these areas, allowing them to go forward with not having to pay as much in fees and other items to get things done and permits to get things done. So certainly can make a difference there. In large markets in 1 million plus, aside from Austin, you're talking about Raleigh, Arizona, in Phoenix, Kansas City, and Las Vegas. In the smallest margin areas were Boulder, Colorado, Corpus Christi, Hilton Head, Reno, and Kylene. And the highest profit margins are still in the west and northeast. That would be San Jose, Ventura, Bridgeport, Connecticut, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. You can see, by the way, that there are notes left in here so that when you get this presentation, you can see a lot of the actual detailed notes that are here built into the presentation that you will have available for your resources as you look over them wrapping up. The lowest raw profits were in the South, places like Corpus Christi, Hilton Head, Kylene, El Paso, and Lubbock. In terms of financing trends, you can see here that that is starting to creep up. So the total financed purchase dollar amount that is being financed is creeping up, and the percent purchased with financing is creeping up. And one, we're running out of cash, and two, the cost of the properties is causing us to need that little extra in financing. And so I think that trend is going to continue as long as you see the profits or the prices rising as well. The average time to flip nationwide is rising in a little bit at 192 days. Part of that is inventory on product. Part of that is, trying to get through regulations, and part of that is just sheer COVID. Trying to jump through the hoops. We did both buy and sell some property this year, and just in trying to get a clear title report, trying to get into the courthouse and get that title research done. For many of the courthouses being shut down, or they're only letting 1 and 2 people in at a time, it just takes longer now to get a transaction done period. So that has helped that number rise to 192 days. Home flippers who sold homes in the third quarter took an average of 192 days to complete, which is the highest level since the third quarter of 2003, which just amazes me. You'd think with technology we could, speed that up, but still tough in the COVID era. So the latest number is up from an average of 184 days in the second quarter of 2020 and 176 days in the third quarter of last year. I want to thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate the support that you've given us through this year, the support that you've given each other through this year, and just the opportunity to serve you and to be together at our REIAs, even if it's been just virtual, being able to have the information to share together and network. So thank you so much. It's the last of our sessions in 2020. And I told Charles and Lori as we were preparing for this call, you get all excited thinking about that in terms of being able to feel like you've wrapped up, but we'll be back. Don't worry. We will be back in January with another installation of our industry updates and legislative updates, hopefully with some very, very good news in terms of what's available to us in the CARES Act and how to execute on that, and then the numbers going forward in the industry. So Charles and Ryan want to chime in, and then Ryan, you can close us out.
Let's say I'll make two comments real quick. There was a question on there, and I think it's a question that's still all in theory right now. And Ed asked about if there's going to be a rubber band effect of people leaving the cities and then coming back to them. And I think we're still in the very beginnings of that leaving stage, and how the next 6 months go is going to determine how much rubber band or if it's just an exiting. But we'll see on that. The other one is the question that Said asked on tax relief. I've speculated probably as much as I want to on this bill coming forward right now. We're going to have to wait to see how it comes out, and we will be back to you as soon as it does come out with as many details as possible, as quickly as possible. Other than that, just hang on, and they're looking at more PPP funds. I'm not sure if they're going to do EIDL or not. That's been bandied in, bandied out. So as soon as we get something passed, we'll be back out to you folks to let you know where the help is at and how you can get it. With that, Merry Christmas.
Well, I just want to thank the entire team, National REIA, Rebecca, Lori, Charles, and making it possible for us to even have these updates. We greatly appreciate that as well. And guys, let's just all have a positive outlook on what's going to happen in 2021. We're going to think positive things, positive thoughts collectively, and we'll be looking forward to bringing you more updates and positive updates. We're going to blame Charles if it's not good news, but we'll be looking forward to serving you again in 2021. And with that, I just want to say have a wonderful holiday, a very happy New Year, and everybody be safe.
Happy holidays.